Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another video. If you like those big lanyards from the 70s, well, you are definitely looking at the right video. These cars look more like a yacht with wheels than a regular car. Just the size of the front hood, it probably could be the size of a Fiat 600 or a smart car nowadays. These cards were huge, but let's give them a proper presentation. We have in front of you right now, it's a 1/43 scale, 1978 Mercury Grand Marquis. And this is the four-door model. What a nice looking lanyard. And I'm not usually crazy about lanyards, but there's a few of them that I really like. Some of them were too big already, and I could probably say this one's a little too big already. I could definitely see they could have made the hood, the front a little smaller, the rear a little smaller, but the looks, I'm not sure it will still be there because this car, I'm so used to seeing them so big and bulky. That's already like a staple. That's you could see this as American car from the 70s and the 60s from definitely at least 3 blocks away. When you see all those small cars and then you see this big lanyard in front of you. But they really showed their presence and they were quite elegant. And this one in specific, this the Mercury Grand Marquis to me was really elegant. I love, first of all, those cover rear wheels. I always found them to be very elegant and fashionable. The two-tone color, obviously, they're really good looking. They're not the best, especially when those vinyls start peeling off, or if it's a white one like this one or light color, it starts getting stained with the rain. You know, it's not the best. It's definitely not the best, but again, it's still very pretty. All right, let's give some information about this gorgeous looking car. One second, let's check it out. Uh, okay, this model came out in 1975. And by the way, just so you know, the Mercury Grand Marquis, it was on sale since 1975, not since, from until 2011. And that was because, if I'm not mistaken, that was the last year the Mercury was around. Unfortunately, Mercury no longer is in business. That's when the era that a lot of the brands were going out of business. Mercury, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, and a few others. But Saturn too, the smaller brands like Saturn and Geo, all those years between like the late 90s to like the early, I'll say by 2012, we lost literally like about 10 brands altogether. I mean, just talking about between GM and Ford. That's not good numbers, right? But especially GM, but let's get to that in a different video. Because this is not a GM product, this is a Ford product. Actually, Ford only gave up on Mercury because Ford doesn't have that many brands. Only had Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln. Lincoln is still around. Ford is definitely still around. So Mercury's the only one that they said, you know what, is probably not really worth it to have it no more. Okay, this is the very first generation. They were on sale between 1975 all the way down till the first generation. They were until 1978. So this is the very last year of this model. But I really like this model. I think this is the one that was from the Mercury Marquis. I think this was the Grand Marquis. This was the best to me. I like the one following this one, but they sure made it a lot smaller. by the late 70s, early 80s, they started shrinking all their vehicles from those big, big lanyards. They started making them a little smaller and smaller because they know the gasoline was more expensive and obviously it was not worth having these lanyards no more. All right, guys. So just so you know, the engines on these cars, by the way, like I said before, they had them as a two-door or four-door. They were considered full-size vehicles. No need to say it. You probably could notice that from 10 miles away. And let's see. Let's get some information on these cars. One second. Let's see if I got some information on the engines. I don't have info on. Okay, they have a. By the way, so you know, the Mercury Grand Marquis was the second best-selling Mercury line. After the Cougar, they sold over 2.7 million units, and that was in 36 years of continuous production. Not bad numbers. I mean, not the greatest because Mercury never could never catch up to Ford. They were always behind a little bit because they were always a little more expensive because they catered to the people that didn't want to have a Ford because they were too plain and basic, but they couldn't afford a Lincoln because they were very expensive or more luxurious. So Mercury was the middleman, the one a step above Ford, but a step below Lincoln. So that was the position that Mercury held. So sometimes the middleman is the one that loses because you don't really have a ground. You don't really have a public that really looks for you only. You always have that one that couldn't afford a Lincoln or the one that doesn't really like the Ford because they're too plain and basic. So that was the basic, position on these cars. So they only came as an automatic transmission, no stick shift on these cars. That's uh, lanyards are usually not known for having stick shift. All right, guys, I'm gonna let it go around a few times, and I'll be right back. All right, guys. So, what do you guys think about these big American cars that obviously we don't get to see them no more? They no longer around like they used to. They still, a few brands are still left, like Buick and Chevrolet and Ford or Cadillac or Lincoln, but we don't have that many options that we used to back in the days. Mercury was a very nice brand. The biggest problem with Mercury was, again, was the middleman in the middle, like I explained before, and that affected them a big time. All right, guys, have you ever seen these big cars, these big Mercuries? Were they sold in your country? I know in Europe these cars were not definitely not very popular if they had any of them. The size only would be a big issue for their smaller streets, but you still have them. If you still see them, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to give me that beautiful thumbs up. I really, really appreciate. Don't forget to click and subscribe and click the bell next to the subscribe button that will remind you when I'm posting more videos. Take care of yourselves more than ever, as I always say, and goodbye.